Fine, Nintendo. Fine, you got me. I resisted the Nintendo Entertainment System Mini just fine because as much as the NES meant to gaming, and yes, even to some of my earlier gaming experiences, I just didn't see it or the collection of games on it as good value. Frankly, if we're honest with ourselves, many of those games just didn't age very well. Some did, absolutely. Most didn't. And outside of the admittedly attractive novelty of having a mini NES sitting around, I just didn't see myself actually playing those games enough to justify the asking price. Leaving aside the whole legally dubious option of ROMs and emulators on things like my Raspberry Pi, but today, with the announcement of the Nintendo Classic Mini version of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES or SNES. There's an argument starter right there, by the way. Ask someone if they should say it SNES or SNES. I say SNES. But yeah, with the Mini SNES, you got me. I pre-ordered practically the very moment that EB Games listed it for pre-order. And I feel slightly grumpy at myself for failing to resist the nostalgia bait this time. But, on the other hand, the value is much better this time, with SNES games being almost by default larger and longer and richer, and many with great replayability. There's even several games on the 21 game list in it that I have never played in their original form, and I've always really wanted to get around to it someday. And now, someday is coming. Here's my excuse to finally get around to them. The list reads like this: Contra 3, Donkey Kong Country, EarthBound, Final Fantasy 3, F-ZERO, Kirby Superstar Kirby's Dream Course, The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, Mega Man, X Secret of Mana, Star Fox, which, by the way, comes with the near infamous and in fact unreleased Star Fox 2, Street Fighter 2, Turbo Hyper Fighting Edition, Super Castlevania 4, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, Super Mario World, which is just an absolute classic, Super Metroid, Super Punch-Out with 2 exclamation points if you please, and Yoshi's Island. That's a great list of games right there, and a list I can easily justify paying 120 Australian dollar dues for to own and play in a legitimate, legally white way. And I can play them on the controllers they were always meant to be played on. Not an Xbox controller plugged into a Raspberry Pi or PC with an emulator, and not some USB lookalike knockoff controller for the SNES, but a proper, Nintendo-approved one, which, except for the legendarily fragile shoulder buttons, seriously, how many people did you know who owned a SNES who didn't break at least one of those shoulder buttons? Certainly no one who owned Street Fighter for a start. Aside from those, one would hope it feels exactly like the original ones did. But things I'd like to see improved over what I heard, at least, about the Mini NES include longer controller cords for a start. The Mini NES ones were less than a meter long, which is ridiculous for something you have to plug in your TV and sit on your couch to play. I am seeing reports that the ones coming with the Mini SNES are longer, but not by much, 1.5 meters apparently. I'd also like to see better stock control. For what it's worth, Nintendo have already promised, Nintendo promises, not to cock it up this time. We'll see about that. I, personally, still believe the legendary stock shortages of the Mini NES were the classic Nintendo marketing tactic of short supply to drive demand by triggering the fear of missing out, or FOMO. But all that really happens is a lot of frustrated customers and lots of sleazy, creepy eBay scalpers jacking up the prices to revolting levels to sell to idiots, and idiots buy them and they get away with it every friggin' time, and it drives me batshit insane! Also, on the NES one, having to get up and hit a button on the unit itself just to use the menus or load up saves, that was dumb. Let's have a way to do that from the controller, please, Nintendo. Some kind of button combination. Also in the SNES days, game manuals were a big deal. There were lots of content in those manuals, character bios, backstory, even tips. Can we please have those in an on-screen readable format? Please? But yeah, the Mini SNES, or Mini SNES, or Mini Super Nintendo Entertainment System is a much more tempting item than the Mini NES was. Come the end of September, when it launches here in Australia, expect a review, musings, and more than likely I'll be streaming at least a few of the games, like Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, for instance, itself a 15 to 30 hour gameplay experience, by the way, just to give you an idea about the value in this thing. And it's a game I never played because it wasn't until several years later, with Pokemon, that I finally found a love of RPGs. Because back in the early 90s with the SNES, I was all about arcade-style games, especially arcade ports, because I loved the arcades back then. Remember arcades? Remember when they had actual video games in them and not ticket machines and claw machines and... So what about you guys? Are you getting a mini SNES or mini SNES? Any games you wished were on that list that aren't? Any games that are on the list that you're jazzed about finally getting a chance to play? Personally, I wish Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time was on there. Loved that game. Also, Mortal Kombat had a very decent SNES port too. Far, far better than the awful Mega Drive one. There's a fanboy war from way back when. And on that thought, another thing I'd like to be added, of course, the ability to expand the game library. Please, Nintendo. Make us pay for it if you will, but come on. A better ongoing value for this thing, please. But there you are, it's the big gaming news of the day. Pop an opinion in the down below area as you do. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.